So guys, welcome to Dev Diary, episode 11, and it's the 29th of March, 2018. So we're just gonna quickly go through some of the progress we've made in the project thus far, and hopefully outline the kind of short-term goals for the next episode, episode 12. So I'm going to jump into the game, and we're going to play an editor. As you can see, it's printing my location. I'll explain a little why I'm printing my location in the top left hand corner of the window there. What I might actually do is just full screen this for now. Oh, my mouse has been captured. Just close that and we'll buy again. Okay, so I won't go full screen this time. So I'm printing my location there, and the reason I'm printing my location is for the fast travel system. I did a lot of work on that during the week, and just to get everything running smoothly, it was important for me to know the location in the world of the player. So you can probably see in the center of the screen we have our own crosshair. It's white for the time being, a nice kind of a Celtic swirl in keeping with the kind of theme of the game. But again, that'll probably be changing. It's nice to have something in there, but again, a lot of this stuff is placeholder for now. So we have our crouch. It's still kind of popping. It's not kind of easing in and easing down. Our sprint is kind of working. There's no limit on the sprint yet. You can just kind of sprint for ages, but I mean, it's a case of just getting them in. You can always tweak them afterwards. All my feedback is there. It's, you know, walk, sprint. Our doors are working slightly better. You can see it's printing door dark blue when I interact with the box, and when I leave the box it prints door in a different color to tell me that I've moved away from the door and I'm no longer interacting with it. So with that said, we have a couple of things we can check out. If you were here for the intro before I started streaming live, you would have heard the same music, but if I go to M, you notice now that I have an animated map screen. We have some clouds that obscure other parts of the world that we'll be able to explore later in the game. Right now, for the demo build, I'm only focusing on the main island. But these clouds will kind of the opacities will change in order to show you parts of the level that are kind of not available right now, but that you'll be able to travel to later on in the game. Again, we're keeping with that kind of Celtic design. Again, this is early days. These are this communicates the idea of the kind of core idea of the graphical style I'm going for, but again, these are all open to change in the throughout the course of the project. As to with the mouse cursor, this is a custom mouse cursor, and I like it, but again, I'm going to try out a few different designs rather than settle on one early on. I'm going to try out a few. So we're going to try our fast travel system now. We're going to maybe go to Tránamana. Tránamana is the Gaelic for the beach or the strand of the monk. So this would historically have been, you know, there would have been a monastery around here. So Tránamana, the beach of the monk. Fast travel there, and you can see that I fast traveled over to that area. At the moment, I'm using the same stone asset for my fast travel points throughout the world. We're at the strand of the monk here now. What we'll do is we'll fast travel somewhere else. We'll go to Ahadun. This is well, no, we'll go. Where would we go? We go over here, Cluckboy. Cluck meaning stone, Bui meaning yellow, so we go to Yellowstone. So here we are, and we're fast traveling around. But for a lot of you, you'll notice as as I fast travel, the foliage and a lot of other stuff are still streaming in as the player spawns, and that's a bit of a no-no. So I'd like to cut away to a loading screen, but again I'd like to talk about that a bit maybe later on in the stream, and kind of some of the things that we're going to try and achieve for episode 12. So yeah, we're going to go back to the village, and here we are back at Perchine. This is the kind of place where we started off. We spawned in just over there where I'm shooting the kind of gun there, and yeah, so our fast travel system is up and working. It's kind of rough around the edges. There's still a lot to be done, as you can see here, in areas like this especially, where there's quite a lot of foliage and stuff to stream in. We're kind of streaming in a bit too early. One of the things I've noticed is that it seems to be certain actor classes that stream in slowly, such as foliage and things like that, whereas static meshes, like if I go back to Perchine, they're pretty much there on load. So we're going to try and achieve in the next while is sort out that problem mainly, and I'll talk about that in a little while. But I'm just going to come out of here, and we're going to actually go into the blueprints now and have a look at what's going on. So in order to fast travel around our world, regardless of what map is loaded, even though we're not using traditional level streaming, we're kind of using a more open world solution that we talked about before, called world composition. So that's where Unreal itself handles our level streaming, and it's kind of designed more for open world games and open world projects like ourselves. So in order to kind of do that, what we need to do is, and I'll show you here in the settings, if we go to project settings, I believe it's in maps, I could be wrong, it could be in somewhere else. Here we are. So we need to create a game instance class. So for our purposes, we created the standard CGD on all my content. I put that as the prefix to everything, so I can quickly find certain things. I do have other prefixes, but it's just a quick way of, like, if you're in the browser or if you're searching for assets and blueprints, it's good to have a kind of a standardized way of prefixing all your own assets so you can find them quick. So we've got my own instance class here, and what I'll do is I'll just open that up, and it should be in here. So it's this guy here. So if we open the blueprint for that, and you can see that we have events which we call on from our map that trigger the teleporting and loading of the level. Now you may notice that this open level guy right here is actually, these are both the same node, just copied, and to keep it kind of neat I have two rather than all these connections going to one. But the idea there being is that we can, at the moment we're only pointing to our main streaming level, but if we go to a different map where we're streaming in, well, streaming's the wrong term, but if we go to a different persistent map that has its own children that it world composition handles, then we can go to those. So that's what it looks like in here. I'll quickly, for the changing of the zone, I'll quickly show you the macro for that. So get all actors of class, and it has the blueprint for our stone, and each of those has its own unique name. So fast travel name gets compared here, and if it's all true and if all's good, it'll get the spawn location on that blueprint and teleport us there. So somewhere in here is this is called after we've loaded the appropriate map down here. But with the way I've kind of set things up here, I'm just going to go to the actual user interface blueprints, and we're going to load the map. So here we are in the map, and I've all kinds of animation and graphics going on, but for now what we're really interested in is these guys here. So these are the on-clicked events for the for each fast travel point. So with these, you can see that I can select different maps, and these go back to this guy here. Well, what's CGD map A001? Well, that's a child of the main persistent level that we're loading. So that's how we parse that and get to the level that we want to get, and each zone then we can pick from here. Now at the moment I have A001, B001, and they all correspond to the actual maps. So if we want to kind of have more than one fast travel point in that map, we can have A002, and I've just kind of set it out that way that we can kind of expand on the system as things get a bit busier later on. But coming back over to here, it means that if I go to the design here, and you can see that we have an area obscured under a cloud, well, in the future, for this, we can see that if we go to levels, we can see all the dependent levels of this that the world composition is kind of dealing with. A few of these I'll probably get rid of because they're only here at design time. That I'll probably remove as we move along. But for now, if we were to change from this map, let's say, to another island over here that's in a separate map with its own world composition settings, then that's where this would come in handy, so that we can, you know, change it here, and then we're done. We don't have to do more than that, and just kind of place, you know, carry on our naming conventions for the new fast travel points, and we should be fine. So rather than having one huge open world, we can break it down and kind of do things that way. For the demo, however, we're only really focusing on this, but it's nice to kind of leave things in a way that, you know, either me or someone else working with me can kind of take this and run with it. So with that said, what I want to do is I want to just show you kind of the progress we've made on some of the other things. So we have a loading screen, and the image and the text of loading is just a static image in the background, again using our clouds, trying to stay with the same kind of visual style. Our little guy here has an animation where it kind of spins around. It takes 2 seconds for it to do 360. Well, as a lot of you animators might know, it doesn't do 360, it does 359.987 or something like that, so that we get that seamless kind of linear kind of movement. Because when it goes back to loop, it's at those frames that we kind of don't need to animate. So that's our loading screen. Now, what I had done was I was calling the load, creating a widget with the loading screen, and then going to open level. But it wasn't really a loading screen. It looked like a loading screen, but it didn't function as one, because the open level call was happening after I loaded the loading screen. So it wasn't functioning as a loading screen. It wasn't waiting for all the assets and the level to stream in, showing us the loading screen until that happened, and then spawning us in. It was kind of just popping up a loading screen and then streaming everything in after the fact. So I kind of decided to take a look at how I would go about doing a loading screen. Now, if you're doing a regular old school, well, it's kind of not old school, it's just a design choice, I guess. If you're doing level streaming, the solution to that is a bit more straightforward. If, however, you're using world composition and you're doing an open world project, then you would be inclined, like I am here, we have two maps, GUI main menu and GUI loading. So CGD being the design levels and the kind of actual levels themselves, and GUI being the user interface levels. Now that's kind of the approach you would take if you're doing a streaming project. But you're going to run into trouble if you're using world composition and you're trying to implement a system like that. The two don't marry very well. So with that in mind, I kind of started looking at other options. And one of the options that was kind of discussed on the forums is a plugin, a loading screen plugin. And even though this is kind of okay, I still don't like it in the sense that if I go into the actual plugin now, that's the enable panel for it. But if I go into, you can see under game, these are plugins that are kind of specific to each game. So we have loading screen here. If we look through the options, we have some text, we have some images that we can use, and we can also have them as we can also have them in a slideshow format, and we have movies. I don't really like that idea. I'd much rather use a widget, for the reason being that it's that we can still use. We're still running in a separate stream. We're in parallel to the actual main game instance and the other Unreal stuff. But with a movie, we're kind of limited, and I don't want to have to render movies and do, you know, animated graphics stuff outside the engine. I'd like to keep as much as I can in engine. I don't want to have to like go messing around in After Effects and kind of doing like stuff there, because we have those tools at our disposal, and there's no point in complicating the software pipeline by adding more tools. We'd be back to the days of Scaleform and Flash if we were to do that, so it's a bit silly. I'm going to stay away from it. So with that said, I kind of started messing with that, and as a lot of you guys know that you know, I'm primarily like a level designer and an environment prop artist. I could do a bit of scripting. I'm getting a bit better with blueprints, but once this kind of stuff starts coming up, it gets a bit scary. So here we are in Visual Studio, and in order to kind of get some of the plugins working, I needed to kind of create the C++ side of the project. It's good to have it in there. I'm sure I'll probably need it in the future, but just to enable stuff, if I go to I think it's build.cs, you can see that right here in this line I've highlighted, this enables the movie player, so that we can kind of have that running in a separate string, parallel to everything else. And with that, I kind of started going, well, here we are, we're kind of gone down the rabbit hole here. And as I've said to a lot of you guys, or a lot in the past in other streams, rather than, you know, getting out of depth and kind of spending ages with C++, something that I'm not very good with at all, and it's kind of outside my skill set. You know, if you were to tot up the hours that it would take in order for me to get that system to work, you know, if you break it down time and money wise, then, you know, I'm going to spend days in C++ trying to get that to work, and that's not really an option for me. So if I'm just going to bring up my Epic Games thing here. So if I go to the marketplace, and I'll quickly go over to whenever it's ready, of course. I'll quickly go over to my what I have in my basket. So here is an LSS loading screen system, and this basically will take care of all that for me, allowing me to use not only movies, images, but also my own widgets that I can design in Engine. And it's a Blueprint solution. It's implemented through Blueprint, so I don't need to run around and mess about in C++ and Visual Studio. I know I could probably do it if I put the time in, but that's not the point. The point is to get the demo ready in time. And when there's a bit more of a budget, I can always come back and outsource that, or beg, borrow, and steal. Beg some coder friends of mine to come on board, and for the price of a couple of days' wages, sort it out for me. So yeah, it's €36.43. So if you were to do the math, even if you were to pay yourself as an indie like me a miserly wage of €25 a day, then I'm going to spend way more than 2 days working on that. And at €36.43, it's a no-brainer, really. So I'm still doing my homework on it, but this seems like a good solution. I have bought content in the past that I wasn't terribly impressed with, that I'm not going to use in my game, but I did learn a lot from purchasing them and checking them out and kind of pulling them apart and deconstructing them and just getting to know what the developer of this has done. So in that respect, I don't, even if I ultimately don't end up using the entirety of this loading screen system, then it's going to help me in the long run, because I'm going to understand a bit more about how other people are implementing their loading systems. But to be honest with you, compared to some of the other content that I've purchased and not used, this seems to be of a higher caliber. And generally, it's hard to go around with blueprints. I think when you're purchasing other content, assets and stuff, that's more or less where you and materials, that's where things get a bit weird. So the plan is to try and implement this loading screen system for the next project. So if we go back to our get rid of scary Visual Studio there, and we'll go back to our I think was it in the game instance class? It was. So we'll go back to our game instance class. So what I envisage is, rather than us using these open level nodes, what we'll be using the ones that we're going to purchase from the asset store, and they have conditions on them. So it's pretty much identical to the open level system, but in here we can set, well, do we want to what widget we want to display, is there a delay regardless of load, what we want to wait for to load in. So that way I'm not loading in and having foliage just kind of pop up and kind of stream in after the player. So I can set different flags for different things to load in, and I can kind of do it here, and then that should propagate down through the rest of my project. So with that said, there's a few other things I'd like to work on, and we'll go back in here. Just as I have the you can see how the speed of the sprint kind of eases up and eases down. I'm going to use the same method when it comes to crouch, so that we're not popping up and down. So that's one of the things I'd like to fix for episode 12. We're going to implement the loading system. Once I purchase it, I'll probably pick it up tomorrow, and if I can get those two things working, I'll be happy enough. Other things I'd like to develop on is expanding what's happening here in the game instance class, and kind of prepping it for more quests and things like that, so that we have like a game state machine as such. Just a few other things I'd like to touch on. We're going to go into our first person blueprint. Oh, that's just the first person content. First person blueprint, blueprints character. So this is pretty much a default first person blueprint. I have the VR stuff pushed down here. We initialize our fast travel system at begin play. That's the very first thing we do, and then we push off down into some of this VR stuff, which I don't really need right now. We have our mouse input, our jump input, our crouch input, and our sprint. So you can see here there's a timeline animation for the speed of our sprinting, and I'm probably going to put that in here. And I'm also going to add a cooldown period in here. Another thing I've noticed, we have updated the project to engine version 4.18, and some of the cool little things that I've noticed is here in our print text that we have for a lot of kind of debug in a lot of our kind of actions and for getting our player location, which I'll show you in a little while, is only going to come out in development mode. So if we actually cut a build of the game, crunch a build, it won't come out. So one of the things that I was doing was rather than printing, I was doing a print text of the player location, and that was kind of taking up the whole screen. So it's worth print string. That way it just updates. What I could do is I could actually show you. Actually, no, it's no point in doing that. But if I rather than like in the top left hand corner there where I was getting the position of the player, it was kind of just, you know, I was getting a massive column as it updated. So here it's kind of one thing, which is fine. So yeah, in the new 4.18 they won't be crunched out in our builds. So we're going to be expanding in the player. We'll probably be tweaking a lot of things. We have our projectile and stuff here, but we'll be doing some customization of the default first person character blueprint rather. I have backed up my project, so at this stage where everything's working and everything's good after the migration to 4.18, just so that if, as I go around messing around in here, if I break anything I can roll back. The project is fully integrated now with Visual Studio and has its own C++ library. There's nothing going on in there right now, but that should be useful coming up. I'd like to maybe keep up to date with migrating to the newest version of each engine as it comes out more often, and kind of stay on top of that a bit more. So okay guys, for the next episode we should have some loading systems, we should have some more player control refinement, and looking into the future beyond that, we're going to have to start thinking about how we're going to approach quest and mission design, and how we're going to utilize our game instance for that. So cool. I look forward to kind of the next episode. We've made some good progress this week, and hopefully if everything goes as smoothly, we should have some good progress for next week. So cool guys, thanks for tuning in, and I'll chat to you all again.